Welcome to the Forever Better Academy podcast, where you will be given the principles, tools, and techniques to reach the next stage on your journey of self-mastery. Who could you become? I'm your host, Wade Vincent. Hey guys, have you ever wanted something so badly that you completely ignored what was right in front of your face? I have. My name is Wade Vincent, and thank you for being here on another episode of the Forever Better Academy podcast. Today, what I want to speak with you guys about is being truthful with yourself, right? So, when I was younger, very much like anyone, when you're growing up in your sort of late teen years and you start to really get a sense of who you are and what you would like to contribute, and also and probably at that stage in life, I guess you're very focused on what you can get from the world rather than what you can give to the world. And for those of you that have been along on the journey thus far, you are familiar with my backstory, and I very much was captivated by hip-hop, right? The whole culture, everything about it. So right from when I was a little boy, probably about maybe 7, maybe younger, went for the very first time. We were very poor. I come from a family with a single mother and one sister, and basically went for the first time ever on a train ride from Brisbane, which is where I live, which is the capital city of Queensland, about an hour's flight north of Sydney, and took a train ride down to Melbourne, which is the capital of Victoria, and that's basically an hour's flight south of Sydney, right? So, and for context, right, I didn't get on a plane till I was 23 years old, not even domestic, right? So that wasn't in my realm. I had no chance of experiencing that. So very much got on this train. I remember, it was just this rickety old train with these sort of green fabric seats, and not very comfortable, and you couldn't really recline them. And I remember sleeping on the floor of the train like as a kid, and that was the first time that I saw graffiti along the train tracks, right? Just on the sound barriers and all the buildings and that face the train line. And as a little kid, it felt like a giant comic book come to life, like vivid characters and pictures and cartoons and colors and words and just intensity, and I was hooked. That was it. That was it. I remember and told my mum at the time, I'm gonna do that when I grow up. And just when you find that thing, right, like when you're as I say, finding what appeals to you in the world, because there's so much wonder out there. There's all kinds of exciting things, but when you find that thing that hits you, that's that thing. And that was very much for me, right? And not just stopping there, right? Like that was especially breakdancing, b-boying. That was huge. Like the dance form, the graffiti. They're very much. Anyone who knows hip-hop knows that there's 4 elements of hip-hop culture that very much intertwine, right? Especially in an old school sense. I'm not sure if it's as prevalent these days, where when I came up, everybody did more than one element, or it wasn't like a separation like it is now. Like the dudes that would, or the girls that would DJ, when they weren't putting on shows, were doing graffiti at night or on the weekends, and competing in b-boy and b-girl battles, and rapping and having ciphers. Like it was kind of all encompassing. It's weird to me now to think about not doing each part of it, right? It was just, it's like if you imagine like an ethnic culture, right? Like there's song and dance and tribal customs, or traditional dress and ways to do things, and in any culture it's all encompassing. People don't just go, oh, I'm just gonna do the singing but not the dancing. It's just part of that belief system that everyone shares that brings you together, right? So when I was um, doing graffiti and going to like b-boy classes and training and learning, all the walls were covered in graffiti, so it was just hand in hand. And when there was an event on, or like a cipher or competition, there was open mic, and it was like, yeah, I'm gonna rap. Like, it just, that's what it was, you know. So the whole thing immersed me. I was just completely captivated, right, by hip hop and the culture in its entirety. So um, after getting in trouble as you do doing graffiti, you know, because it's not legal, right? Like you know, you're doing damage and vandalizing and, you know, breaking and entering and trespassing, all kinds of stupid stuff that you don't really know when you've got bad influences around you. And you know, as I said, come from a single parent family, so I didn't really have a dad to sort of guide me and steer me in the right direction at that point in my life, right? So uh, got into some stupid trouble and decided that there wasn't a future for me taking that pathway with graffiti. So the focus became the music, rapping, right? So many of my crew, our group, Born Fresh Records, pretty much focused on that, and did you know, like b-boying and that on the side, but it became the dominant element, so to speak. So I and all I wanted to do was be a famous rapper, and it wasn't my motivation and drive wasn't driven. I wasn't driven by being, you know, famous. It was just the way to get a message to more people, and was purely driven by wanting to make an impact in people's lives, and taking all the lessons and stories and experiences that I was going through and sharing them with others. Um, and the intent was to, you know, help people with their lives by using my experiences and sharing them, that they could get something from it. Now, I wasn't mature enough at the time to really understand how to do that, and I didn't have the life experience, because, you know, there's only so much you can know when you're young. You have to go through things, right? And I'm constantly learning and growing and improving myself, and I feel only now do I really have a few stories and experiences that are helpful in the way that I wanted to do when I was making music, right? And being young and naive and immature, and I didn't understand the intent or how to best approach that. So much of it became, even though the intent was there, it ultimately became music I made for myself, right? And that was probably you know, one of the things that I needed to work on, and ultimately this is where I'm getting to. Like, I know I've given you a big backstory here, but really about the point of today's episode is that being truthful with yourself, right? So when I wanted to do this and make an impact on the world, one of the challenges was I'm in Australia. I didn't grow up in like, as I said, we were poor, but, you know, I wasn't living in a ghetto. Like, we're living in a nice suburb, you know, in Brisbane, and, you know, like, poor area, but I mean, nothing in comparison, right? Like, we're not, you know, worried about life or death situations, or being robbed, or struggling to put food on the table. As little as we had, you know, my mum would make those sacrifices and ensure that we always had food on the table, right? So being based in Australia at this time, like, Eminem was only early days where people still weren't sure sort of how to approach it. It was just starting to take off. So being a white kid that's not American, that doesn't really have, I guess, what would be viewed upon as probably authenticity, right? Now, one of, you know, my favorite sayings from Nas is "real, recognize real," right? So, like, to me, like, I lived it. You know, it doesn't matter where you're from, right? Really, to me, and I don't see that as as a obstacle, but most certainly that's a factor, right? And there's elements where you need to consider those things, right? Location and you know, who you are and where you're at. Like there's all these different pieces of the puzzle that need to align in order to get to that endpoint, right? So, you know, looking back, like ultimately, and this is like advice for anyone that's trying to make it in music. Move to those cities, move to London, move to New York, whatever you know you need to do. Be in that scene, be where the heart of it is, because that's where things happen, right? And I was ultimately so set on my dream, right? That and this is why I want to share this with you guys today. Is I ignored my reality, right? So I was in so much, like there was good elements in that I was determined and I had laser focus, but I only had a portion of the equation. I didn't understand how to navigate what I was experiencing and I guess tweak or refine or fine tune what I was doing to account for the truth that I was experiencing that I was ignoring because of the blinders, right? So uh, I was almost like it's like I didn't let my truth get in my way, right? Now I had all the drive and determination, but that only gets you so far. If you're banging your head against a wall to break a wall down, it may eventually fall down. You're going to have a massive headache, and it's going to take a hell of a lot longer than if you stopped, consider what you're experiencing, and go and got a sledgehammer and knock the wall down effectively, right? So very much I was just no plan, just do it every day, release a heap of songs, you know, make video clips, do a shit ton of gigs. That it was just very, as I said, very immature. My approach, I didn't know, right, and I wasn't. I was a little too stubborn, I think, in that, or hard-headed, right? To use a similar analogy with breaking down the wall, right? And I wasn't letting the truth get in my way, which is unfortunate because truth is absolute, right? And ultimately, the truth always must be acknowledged, right? There's no middle ground, right? It's either true or untrue, and if you're not considering the truth, you're not approaching the situation with the complete perspective, shall we say, right? So it's like there's a good analogy if you've ever heard about, you know, like the whole 10,000 hour rule, right? Like I think it was Malcolm Gladwell that speaks on becoming expert level at anything. Basically takes 10,000 hours of practice. Now there's you know different schools of thought, and some people don't subscribe to that concept, or some people think it's quicker. But for the intent of what we're talking about today, if you practice the wrong technique, following the wrong principles, and ignoring your truth for 10,000 hours, do you think that you will be at the same world expert level as someone who listens to the feedback, receives it, shifts accordingly, and practices effectively, right? Both 10,000 hours, two very different levels, right? And I was most certainly practicing relentlessly, but not adhering to my truth, right? I was too caught up in my how and not my why, which is why I guess ultimately, as I said earlier, I deviated from the true purpose of what I was trying to do, being to share lessons and impact people and powerful messages that would be beneficial to others, and basically became there was like an underlying frustration or bitterness because I couldn't see the forest for the trees, right? I'm still learning and going through the experience and understanding and learning how to navigate it. And ultimately, it's all valuable because it gets me to this point now that I can speak to you about it and share the experience now. Ironically, isn't it? Going through it and making those mistakes so that I truly understand, how best to approach it and can share that. So it's almost like full circle now, right? So um, the thing, right, is I could shape my truth and reality to whatever I wish, right? But I can't do that if I'm still ignoring my truth, and that's the key, right? Like it's finding that really solid balance. It's always this balancing act, right? To just get that right adjustment to the point where you're stubborn enough and determined enough that you won't let anything stop you, but also uh, being aware and as I say, taking that feedback and utilizing the information that you're receiving based upon what's occurring from your actions. Right now, if you adapt to that feedback that you're receiving, it's almost like leapfrogging, like you're getting this little jump, right, where you can choose to ignore your truth and keep doing what you're doing. But I think it was Einstein that said, the definition of insanity is repeating the same actions over and over and over again and expecting a different outcome, right? And that's again, like I can do the wrong thing, like let's use I always go the sports analogies, right? Let's say if you're playing basketball and you're practicing your jump shot and your form's bad and your elbow's sticking out and your hands are on the side of the ball, say like this, right? You're not really holding the ball and you're throwing the ball, shooting like this. You do that 10,000 hours, you've just conditioned yourself to be very, very bad at your jump shot, and ultimately then you have to go back and recorrect it, and it's harder to go back when you've taken all that time and conditioned yourself incorrectly, right? Now, and that's very much what I was doing. And I was making, obviously I'm going to say it's my own music, reasonably quality music. It was as good as any sort of caliber stuff that was coming out of Australia, but just a little too much focus again on myself, right? Too much focus on making music for me and not for other people, and that's a recipe for failure, right? And I had to make a decision ultimately, as we all do, really based upon what my truth was and how I was going to respond to it, right? And I came to the conclusion. I remember, and I might have spoke about this in another episode where I was doing one of the last gigs that I can remember doing down in Melbourne, and it was an awesome gig, lots of fun, and finally felt like I was acknowledged in this circle of pioneers and greats in Australian hip hop, right? And performing with some godfathers, the legends of Australian hip hop music. And I remember looking out to the crowd and seeing, like, normally it would be just intense, right? Like for those kind of guys that are at the upper echelon guys, would be just jam packed and just crazy energy and just awesome underground, like just heavy duty, the ones that know are at those shows, and it's just like intense party and a hell of a lot of fun, right? And I watched that for many, many years because when you're an artist, you're also a fan, and watching these guys and going to their shows and being inspired and motivated by them as well, and seeing what gigs can be like, and getting to that point where it was just, I just picked up on something that the vibe had sort of diminished and dwindled, and it was just something was telling me like it was time to hang up my microphone, shall we say. And I just remember being like, this, it's changing, right? The scene's changing. I'm changing. My, I'm getting older. My drive for this, the way I'm approaching it, it's not going to happen, right? And it got to that moment where I just sort of made that call. I was like, I think it's time to hang this up, and I had to adjust my whole being, like, and really start from scratch, and it was really challenging because I was so determined. Like, when they say to achieve something great, you've got to be obsessed with it, and I was like, there's more elements to it, right? It just, you can't just be obsession, right? Have to do the work, and you have to do the work effectively, and you have to be, in the right place at the right time, and have a bit of luck on your side. There's a few of these key elements that, that make it happen. And even if you have all those elements, there's still no guarantee, right? So there was no other option for me. So I had no backup plan. I was like convinced, this is what my calling is. This is what I'm going to do for my life, and this is who I'm going to be. So I don't need to make a backup, right? I just go out at full force and give it everything I've got. And when you get to that point where, as I say, truth is absolute, and ultimately I had to face my truth and realize, that I wasn't gonna be where I anticipated being, and make it to the level that I wanted to make it to. And it's a weird thing. It's almost like, for me personally, was this like clean slate, like wiped off me. And it was, looking back on it, there's so much wonder in it, and I'm thankful for the experience, because it gives you the opportunity to recalibrate and immerse yourself in it, understand what you're going through, analyze it, and determine what the next step is and who you're going to be, right? Who could you become? And I ultimately felt very empty and lost for probably about 6 months, I think, of just not knowing who I was anymore. And if I wasn't a profit raiser, who was I going to be? Who did I want to be? Just coming to terms with my truth and that next step of where from here, right? Like, it's a really it's an interesting experience, right? One, as I say, I'm thankful for, because it's something that almost feels like a second chance or a second life, or I'm not religious, but the terminology like a rebirth is interesting. I think, maybe it's a common thing that most people go through at some point, where maybe I just grew up late. I don't know, but as I said, I was so dedicated to my dream, and I went at it for so long, probably longer than a lot of other people would have. Many, and we watched this, like, there was countless guys that we all started with when we were like 16, 17, 18, and watching them one by one fall off and quit and go and do different things. And everyone's timing and journey is different. And it was, it was like it kind of births it birthed Forever Better Academy. So ultimately, there's goodness comes from it, and I'm thankful for where I am now and able to share with you guys. But at the time, it's very like a hollow, empty feeling, because you don't know what's next, right? And ultimately, out of all of it, I really learnt how to adapt and make decisions based upon multiple factors, including the truth, and not only what I wish for the truth to be, right? And it's a big one, right? Like, there's elements where, if I think back on it, like, there's moments when I thought, I need to, maybe I'm not good enough, or I should go overseas, or I should do something differently. And the stubborn part of me just ignored that, like, oh, that's just, doubt creeping into your mind. But if you learn to listen to that truth, you can do something about it, right? If you think maybe I'm not good enough, you find out, how do I be good enough? How do I get better? What do I need to do to get to the level that's considered good enough, right? Where do I need to be based to do this? Like there's a very fine line, right? And this is ultimately, as I said, I wasn't facing my truth. I wasn't considering the feedback, and deep down, these little questions were popping up, or these intuitions and feelings and experiences that I wasn't acting upon, that I should have listened to, right? And who knows? Maybe I'd be in a different place. Maybe it might have happened. You don't know, right? And it took me quite a while to learn that lesson. So I wanted to share that with you guys today, that no matter where you are, or what you're doing, or what you're chasing after, what your ambition is, where you're going in your life, take stock of where you're at versus where you want to be. And one of my mentors basically told me, you just got to look at where you want to be versus where you are, and figure out how to close the gap. It's really that simple, right? There's just this distance between 2 points, distance between point A and point B, and how do you get there? How do you reduce that gap? Really simple, right? Great advice from one of my mentors. And as I say, ultimately, the beauty in it, in understanding it with hindsight, is I got to keep my why, and I just changed my how. And I think that's how I ultimately came to terms with the transition to what drives me, being, as always and right from the beginning, to share with people and help them with stories and lessons and words of impact that can make a difference and improve their lives for the better, right? I just want to share and teach and guide and give to others. And that was the initial driver. And it's like it's become full circle, and that's where I got back to. And that's why I think I feel excited and joy about where I am now currently, because I've got a better alignment with that, the why, the calling, the true purpose of why I began in the first place with music, and listened to my truth and adapted to the feedback I was receiving and changed the vehicle, right? And ultimately, I feel closer than I've ever been, and starting to see responses from people, and kind words, and just messages from people that what I'm doing is making a change to their lives, and that's a wonderful, rewarding feeling, So ultimately, I want to leave you with one thing: is remember what it is you set out to do, because ultimately that's your truth. It doesn't matter how you get there. You'll always find your how. But don't ever let go of your truth and the why you do what you do. All right? Who could you become? Thank you guys so much for being here. I enjoyed this one. I hope that you get some value from this, and I'm hoping that you are doing great. It's early in 2022, so keep going. Don't give up on those resolutions and those big dreams and goals for this year. With a bit of luck and hard work and listening to your truth, I'm sure you'll get where you need to get. All right, guys. Thanks again. I'll talk to you next week.